I spent 8 years drunk before realizing other families don't live this way. My first drink wasn't at a party or with friends sneaking alcohol from their parents' liquor cabinet. It was at breakfast on my 8th birthday. Mom poured orange juice into my glass, but I watched her add something from a flask she kept in her purse. She called it a birthday mimosa, said I was old enough now to drink like the grown-ups. The taste was bitter and made my throat burn, but Mom and Dad both raised their glasses to toast me, so I forced it down. They clinked their glasses against mine and smiled like they'd just given me the best present ever. My younger brother Liam watched from across the table with jealous eyes. He was only 5, still too young for the family tradition. Dad noticed him staring and ruffled his hair. "Don't worry, buddy. 3 more years and you'll get your turn too." I didn't understand then what that meant. I just felt special, chosen, like I'd crossed some invisible threshold into adulthood that made my parents proud. By the time I was 9, I had my own flask, a small silver one with my initials engraved on it that Mom gave me for Christmas. She showed me how to fill it from the bottles under the sink, how to take small sips throughout the day to maintain what she called the right level. "Too much and you're sloppy," she explained. "Too little and you're uncomfortable. You want to find that sweet spot where everything feels smooth and easy." I practiced at home during winter break, learning to drink just enough to feel that warm, buzzy sensation without stumbling or slurring my words. Dad praised my control, said I was a natural. By January, I was bringing my flask to school, taking bathroom breaks to sip from it between classes. The teachers never noticed, or if they did, they didn't say anything. Our family had a reputation in our small town. The Harringtons were known for being fun, social, always hosting parties that lasted until dawn. Every holiday, every birthday, every random Friday became an excuse for my parents to fill the house with people and alcohol. Mom worked from home doing something with computers that I never fully understood. Dad was a car salesman who bragged about closing deals by taking clients out drinking. They both functioned perfectly well while maintaining a constant level of intoxication that would have hospitalized normal people. I thought this was just how adults lived. I thought everyone's parents had liquor with breakfast and wine with lunch and cocktails before dinner and nightcaps before bed. The morning routine at our house was precise and ritualistic. Dad would wake up and immediately pour himself what he called an eye-opener, usually whiskey in his coffee. Mom preferred vodka in her orange juice, clear alcohol that didn't smell as strong. They'd sit at the kitchen table reviewing their schedules for the day, planning when and where they'd drink, making sure they never ran out. By the time Liam and I came downstairs for breakfast, they'd already finished their first drinks of the day and were moving on to their second. School was harder drunk than sober, though I wouldn't realize that until much later. Everything felt fuzzy and distant, like I was watching my own life through a foggy window. Math problems took forever to solve. Reading comprehension was a nightmare. I'd stare at sentences and the words would swim around the page, rearranging themselves into nonsense. But I learned to fake it, learned to smile and nod at teachers, to copy homework from smarter kids, to do just enough to avoid failing. My grades hovered around C's and D's, which my parents said was fine. "You don't need perfect grades to be successful," Dad would say. "You need social skills and confidence. Those only come from learning to relax and be yourself." And alcohol made me relax. It made the anxiety that lived in my chest feel smaller, made social situations less terrifying. I became the funny kid in class, the one who always had a joke ready, who could make people laugh even when I didn't understand the lesson. My best friend Caleb started noticing something was off around 5th grade. We'd been friends since kindergarten and he knew me better than anyone. One day after school he asked me straight out why I always smelled like his dad's breath after poker night. I panicked and told him it was cologne, a special kind my dad got me. He didn't look convinced, but he dropped it. That weekend, Caleb invited me to sleep over at his house for the first time in months. I've been avoiding sleepovers because I didn't know how to bring my flask without getting caught. But Caleb had been persistent, and my mom said it would be good for me to spend time with normal kids. She actually used that word, normal, like she knew we weren't. At Caleb's house, everything felt wrong from the moment I walked in. His parents weren't drinking. They made dinner completely sober, sitting around the table having conversations that made sense and stayed on topic. After dinner, they watched a movie together, still sober, laughing at the funny parts with clear eyes and steady hands. I started feeling shaky around 8 p.m. The warm buzz I'd maintained all day was fading, replaced by a jittery, anxious feeling that made my skin crawl. My hands trembled when I reached for the popcorn. Sweat beaded on my forehead even though Caleb's house was cool. I excused myself to the bathroom and pulled out my flask, taking a long drink that burned going down, but immediately made everything feel better. When I came back, Caleb's mom was looking at me strangely. "Are you feeling okay?" "You look flushed." I nodded quickly. "Just tired." The rest of the night was torture. I rationed my flask carefully, taking tiny sips when I could sneak away, but by midnight I'd drained it completely. Lying in Caleb's room in my sleeping bag, I felt worse than I'd ever felt in my life. My heart was racing. Nausea rolled through my stomach in waves. Every sound seemed too loud, every sensation too intense. I didn't sleep at all. At 6 a.m., I called my mom and begged her to pick me up early, claiming I was homesick. The car ride home, Mom handed me a small bottle of vodka. "Drink up," she said gently. "You went too long without it. That's why you feel sick." She was right. Within minutes of drinking, the horrible symptoms faded. My hands stopped shaking. The nausea disappeared. I felt normal again. "You have to be more careful," Mom explained as we drove. "Always make sure you have enough with you. Going without can be dangerous at your tolerance level." She said it so casually, like she was giving advice about remembering to pack a lunch. I was 10 years old and physically dependent on alcohol, and my mother's only concern was that I'd gone too long between drinks. That was the moment I started to suspect something might be wrong with our family, though I couldn't articulate what exactly. I just knew that the sick feeling I'd experienced at Caleb's house was called withdrawal, and withdrawal wasn't something normal 10-year-olds were supposed to understand. Liam turned 8 on a Sunday in March. I watched him receive his first birthday mimosa with the same ceremony I'd experienced 3 years earlier. Mom and Dad toasted him, praised him for not making a face when he swallowed despite the burn. He looked so proud, so excited to finally be part of the family tradition. I wanted to warn him, to tell him to refuse, to explain that once he started, he wouldn't be able to stop. But I didn't have the words yet, didn't understand enough about what was happening to us to name it as abuse. Instead, I watched my little brother take his first steps into alcoholism with our parents' encouragement, and I felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with withdrawal. Over the next months, I watched Liam go through the same progression I had, the morning additions to his juice, the small flask Mom bought him with his initials, the bathroom breaks at school. His grades started slipping just like mine had. His personality changed, becoming looser and sillier. Our parents praised every step, calling him a natural just like his big brother. By age 11, I was drinking more than my parents realized. The amount they gave me wasn't enough anymore. My tolerance had increased to the point where their carefully measured doses left me feeling shaky and anxious. I started stealing from the bottles under the sink, adding extra shots to my flask when they weren't looking. I got better at hiding how much I was actually consuming. My parents thought I was maintaining their prescribed level, but I was drinking nearly twice that just to feel normal. School became impossible. I failed 6th grade and had to repeat it, which my parents barely reacted to. "It's just school," Dad said with a shrug. "Real education happens in life, not classrooms." They pulled me out halfway through my second attempt at 6th grade and started homeschooling me instead. Homeschooling in our house meant Mom giving me worksheets while she worked on her computer. Both of us drinking steadily throughout the day. I'd complete maybe 2 or 3 assignments before giving up, and she'd sign off on my progress without checking my work. Liam was homeschooled too by the time he reached 4th grade. Our house became this isolated bubble where the only reality was drinking and maintaining the buzz and making sure we never ran out of alcohol. Mom ordered groceries online, so she didn't have to leave the house sober. Dad worked fewer and fewer hours, claiming he was building up his client base from home, but mostly just drinking in his office. Our extended family had stopped visiting years ago. Grandma had tried to say something about our parents drinking once, and Dad had banned her from the house. "We're not going to tolerate judgment in our home," he'd announced. "Anyone who can't accept our lifestyle isn't welcome here." So we existed in this weird, isolated world where everything revolved around alcohol. Birthdays weren't about cake and presents, they were about drinking. Holidays weren't about family traditions, they were about drinking. Every celebration, every difficult moment, every regular boring day, the answer was always the same: drink. I was 13 when I first realized other families might not live like us. We'd run out of vodka on a Wednesday afternoon, and Mom sent me to the liquor store with cash and a note saying I was picking up for my parents. The clerk looked at the note skeptically, but sold me 3 bottles anyway. On my way out, I passed a woman with her daughter who looked about my age. The daughter was excitedly telling her mom about a soccer game, speaking in clear sentences with bright eyes and steady hands. I watched them interact, studying the way they moved and talked. The mom wasn't slurring at all. The daughter wasn't swaying. Neither of them had the telltale looseness that came from drinking. They were completely sober in the middle of the day, and they seemed fine, happy even. I stood in the parking lot for 10 minutes after they drove away, vodka bottles clutched against my chest, trying to process what I'd seen. Could people really live without drinking? Could families exist without the constant maintenance of the right level? When I got home and asked Mom if normal families drink as much as we do, she got defensive. "There's no such thing as normal," she snapped. "Every family has their own way of doing things. We choose to live freely and not judge ourselves by society's arbitrary rules." She poured herself a generous glass of wine and took a long drink. People who don't drink are usually uptight and judgmental. They're missing out on life. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I started paying attention when we did venture out into public, which was rare. At the grocery store, at the gas station, at the rare restaurant visit, I'd watch other families. Most of them weren't drinking. Most of the parents moved with coordination and clarity that mine never had. Most of the kids my age weren't sneaking sips from flasks or making excuses to go to the bathroom every 30 minutes. We were different. Maybe not different in the special way my parents claimed, but different in a wrong way, a dangerous way. I tried to stop drinking when I was 14, just stopped one morning, refused the vodka Mom tried to add to my orange juice. Her face went through several expressions, confusion, then anger, then something that looked almost like fear. "You can't just stop," she said urgently. "Your body needs it now. You'll get sick." I told her I wanted to try being sober, wanted to see what it felt like. She called Dad in from his office, and they both sat me down for a serious talk. "This isn't how our family works," Dad said firmly. "We don't do extremes. We maintain balance, and balance for us means drinking." I held out for 6 hours before the withdrawal got too bad to stand. The shaking came first, then the nausea, then something that felt like bugs crawling under my skin. My heart raced so fast I thought it might explode. Sweat poured down my face even though I was freezing. Mom finally brought me a glass of whiskey. "Just drink this," she said gently, "and you'll feel better." She was right. The alcohol made everything stop, made my body calm down, made me feel human again. That failed attempt to quit scared me more than anything else had. I was physically dependent on alcohol. My body didn't know how to function without it anymore. At 14 years old, I was an alcoholic, and my parents had made me this way. The realization should have led to some dramatic change, some moment of clarity where I demanded help. But I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know who to ask. Our family was so isolated that I couldn't imagine a world where someone would intervene. Child Protective Services felt like something from TV, not real life. So I kept drinking, kept maintaining the level, kept existing in the fog that had been my reality for 6 years. Liam was 10 now and drinking just as much as I was. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with questions in his eyes, but he never voiced them. We'd both learned that questioning the family system led nowhere good. The turning point came on a Friday in November. Liam collapsed in the kitchen while trying to pour himself a drink, just crumpled to the floor, unconscious, his skin pale and clammy. Mom and Dad both panicked, which told me this was serious because they never panicked about anything. Dad called 911 while Mom tried to wake Liam up, shaking him and calling his name. The paramedics arrived and immediately noticed the smell of alcohol in the house, on Liam's breath, everywhere. One of them looked at my parents and asked very directly, "How much has he had to drink today?" Mom tried to downplay it, just a little. "He must have gotten into our liquor cabinet without permission." The paramedic wasn't buying it. He examined Liam, checked his vital signs, and his expression grew increasingly serious. "This child has alcohol poisoning. His blood alcohol level is probably dangerously high. We need to transport him immediately." As they loaded Liam onto a stretcher, one of the paramedics noticed me standing in the doorway. She walked over and crouched down to my level. "Honey, are you okay? Have you been drinking too?" I nodded, too scared to lie. The paramedic's face went through several emotions before settling on professional concern. "How much do you drink? Every day? How much every day?" I showed her my flask. She took it, opened it, smelled it, and her jaw tightened. "How old are you?" 14. She stood up and called to her partner. "We need to take both kids. The other child is also showing signs of intoxication." My parents tried to argue, claiming I was fine, that I didn't need medical attention. But the paramedics were firm, and eventually my dad backed down, probably realizing that fighting them would make things worse. I rode in the ambulance with Liam, watching machines monitor his vital signs while the paramedic asked me questions about our family, our drinking, how long this had been happening. At the hospital, they ran blood tests on both of us. The doctor who came back with our results looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Your blood alcohol content is 0.15, she told me. "That's legally drunk for an adult. And you're a child. Your brother's is 0.28. He could have died." They admitted both of us for observation and alcohol detoxification. The next hours were a nightmare, as withdrawal set in properly for the first time. I'd thought that sick feeling at Caleb's house was bad, but this was exponentially worse. Shaking so violent I couldn't hold a cup. Nausea that made me vomit until there was nothing left. Hallucinations, shadows moving at the edges of my vision. The doctors gave me medication to ease the symptoms, but it didn't stop the psychological agony of my body screaming for alcohol, while my brain started clearing enough to understand what had been done to me. Liam was going through it worse in the room next to mine. I could hear him crying, begging for a drink, not understanding why the doctors wouldn't give him what he needed. A social worker came to interview me on day 2. Her name was Grace, and she had kind eyes that made me want to trust her despite years of my parents teaching me not to trust outsiders. She asked careful questions about our home life, our daily routines, our parents' drinking habits. I told her everything. 6 years of drinking, the flasks, the homeschooling, the isolation, the way my parents had systematically turned their children into alcoholics because they couldn't imagine any other way to live. Grace listened without interrupting, taking notes but mostly just letting me talk. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "What your parents did is abuse," she finally said. "Severe, systematic abuse. You and your brother are going to need extensive treatment, both physical and psychological. But you're safe now. Neither of you will be going back to that house." The relief I felt at those words was overwhelming. I started crying and couldn't stop, 6 years of confusion and fear and wrongness finally finding release. I wasn't crazy. Our family wasn't normal. What had been done to us was abuse, and someone finally saw it and was going to stop it. My parents were arrested at the hospital when they came to visit. I watched through my room window as police officers handcuffed my dad in the parking lot while my mom screamed at them about parental rights and government overreach. The detox process took weeks. My body had been dependent on alcohol for so long that withdrawal was medically dangerous, requiring careful monitoring and medication to prevent seizures. Liam struggled even more than I did, his younger body more severely affected by years of poisoning. But slowly, gradually, we both stabilized. The fog that had been my constant companion for 6 years started lifting. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds were clearer. I could think in complete thoughts without everything scattering like leaves in wind. I could read a paragraph and actually remember what it said. The clarity was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Who was I without alcohol? I'd been drunk for so long that I didn't know how to be sober. Grace helped me understand I'd essentially have to learn how to be a person from scratch. Learn what my actual personality was versus what alcohol had made me. Learn how to handle emotions without chemical numbing. Learn how to exist in the world as myself. The criminal case against my parents was straightforward and damning. Medical records showing years of alcohol dependence in children. Testimony from the paramedics and doctors. My own detailed account of our daily lives. The prosecution called it one of the most severe cases of child abuse they'd encountered, systematic poisoning disguised as parenting. My parents' defense was that they'd been teaching us to drink responsibly, preparing us for adult life. Their lawyer tried to argue it was a cultural difference, a family tradition, not abuse. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding them both guilty on multiple counts of child endangerment and abuse. They were sentenced to 15 years each. I was 14, and my parents would be in prison until I was 29. Liam was 10 and would be 25. We'd both be adults before they got out, assuming they served their full sentences. Part of me felt guilty for destroying our family. Part of me felt relieved. Mostly, I felt lost. Liam and I were placed with foster parents, the Castellanos, who specialized in kids with addiction issues. They were patient and understanding, never judging us for what we'd been through. They taught us basic life skills our parents had never bothered with. How to do laundry without being drunk. How to cook a meal sober. How to have conversations that stayed on track because nobody was slurring or losing their train of thought. School was an adjustment. I was years behind academically. My education full of gaps from all the time I'd spent drunk instead of learning. The Castellanos got me a tutor and enrolled me in 9th grade even though my skills were closer to 6th grade level. It was humiliating at first, being 14 and struggling with math problems that kids 4 years younger could solve easily. But slowly, so slowly, things started clicking. Without alcohol fogging my brain, I could actually learn. I could focus on lessons and remember information and make connections between concepts. Therapy was harder than school, talking about what my parents had done, about how I'd spent 6 years of my childhood in a constant state of intoxication, brought up emotions I didn't have words for. Rage at my parents for robbing me of a normal childhood, grief for the kid I could have been if I'd grown up sober, shame about all the years I'd lost to drinking, fear that the damage was permanent, that I'd never catch up to my peers. My therapist, Dr. Vance, helped me understand that healing wasn't linear, that some days I'd feel okay, and other days I'd want to crawl back into the fog of alcohol just to escape the overwhelming clarity of sobriety. He taught me coping mechanisms for when cravings hit, ways to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of numbing them. He helped me separate my identity from my addiction, to understand that being an alcoholic didn't define me even though it was part of my story. Liam struggled more than I did. He'd been younger when the drinking started, his brain more affected by the alcohol. He had developmental delays that might be permanent, cognitive issues that made school nearly impossible. His foster parents got him specialized help, therapy and tutoring and medical monitoring, but progress was slow. I visited him every week, and we'd sit together trying to make sense of what our parents had done to us. Sometimes he'd cry and ask why they couldn't just be normal parents. I never had a good answer. By the time I was 16, I'd caught up academically enough to be in age-appropriate classes. I'd been sober for 2 years, though the cravings still hit sometimes, usually when I was stressed or overwhelmed. The Castellanos had taught me to call them any time I felt the urge to drink, day or night, and they'd talk me through it. I never relapsed, though there were close calls. Days when the world felt too sharp and too real, and I desperately wanted the soft edges alcohol had given everything. I graduated high school at 18, a minor miracle considering where I'd started. The Castellanos threw me a party, and Liam came, and even Grace, the social worker who'd first interviewed me at the hospital, attended. It felt surreal, sitting in a room full of people celebrating my achievement while completely sober. This was what normal felt like. This was what my parents had stolen from me for 6 years. I got accepted to community college for social work, wanting to help other kids in situations like mine had been. Kids whose abuse didn't look like abuse because it was wrapped in family tradition and parental love. I wanted to be the person who could spot the signs, who could ask the right questions, who could intervene before years of damage became irreversible? My parents sent letters from prison sometimes, long rambling things about how they'd been wrongfully convicted, how they'd only wanted what was best for us, how society had criminalized their parenting style. I never responded. There was nothing to say. They'd never admit what they'd done was wrong, never acknowledge that they'd turned their children into alcoholics for their own comfort. Liam got worse before he got better. At 13, he started using other substances, chasing the feeling alcohol had given him. His foster parents tried everything, different therapies, different medications, different schools. Nothing stuck. He went to juvenile detention twice for possession. I visited him there, seeing my little brother in an orange jumpsuit, and wanted to scream at our parents for what they'd done to him. He was just a kid who'd been taught to solve every problem with substances, and now he didn't know any other way to cope. But something shifted when Liam turned 14. Maybe it was finally being the same age I'd been when we got help. Maybe it was just maturity. He agreed to go to residential treatment, a year-long program for teens with addiction issues. I drove 3 hours every Sunday to visit him, watching him slowly, painfully, start to heal. He was angry for months, and I let him be. Angry at our parents, at the world, at me for not protecting him better, even though I'd been a kid too. By the time I was 20, I was working part-time as a youth advocate while finishing my degree. I specialized in cases of medical abuse and addiction, using my story to help social workers identify red flags they might otherwise miss. How many other families were out there doing what my parents had done? How many kids were growing up drunk or high, thinking it was normal because it was all they'd ever known? I gave talks at schools and community centers, starting with the same words every time. I spent 8 years drunk before realizing other families don't live this way. Then I'd tell my story, holding nothing back, because the only way to stop abuse that hides as parenting is to name it clearly and publicly. Some people in the audience would look uncomfortable. Others would get defensive. But always, at least one person would approach me afterward and say quietly, "I think something like that might be happening to someone I know." Liam got out of treatment at 15, 2 years sober and doing better than anyone expected. He moved into a group home for teens in recovery, a structured environment where he could continue healing. We started having dinners together every week, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing, building a relationship based on who we actually were instead of who alcohol had made us. He told me once that he barely remembered what it felt like to be drunk. That scared him because it meant he'd lost huge chunks of his childhood to something he couldn't even fully recall. I understood that fear. My memories from ages 8 to 14 were fuzzy and incomplete, whole years reduced to blurred impressions because I'd been too intoxicated to form proper memories. Our parents got out on parole when I was 23. They'd served 8 years of their 15-year sentences, deemed rehabilitated by the parole board despite never admitting wrongdoing. They weren't allowed to contact Liam or me per the conditions of their release, but I saw them once, accidentally, at a grocery store. They looked older, smaller somehow. Mom's hair had gone gray. Dad had developed a limp. They were together in the produce section, and I watched them from the end of the aisle. Neither of them appeared to be drinking, which surprised me until I realized prison had probably forced them sober. But as I watched Dad's hand shake while reaching for apples, I recognized the tremor of someone fighting cravings. They were both still alcoholics. They'd just been forced to stop drinking, not to actually heal. I left before they saw me, not ready for that confrontation. I spent years waiting to feel forgiveness toward my parents, waiting for some moment of clarity where I'd understand they were sick and doing their best and worthy of compassion. That moment never came. I understood intellectually that alcoholism is a disease, that my parents were victims of their own addiction. But they'd also made choices. They'd chosen to force that addiction onto their children. They'd chosen to isolate us and homeschool us and systematically poison us rather than get help. Some actions don't deserve forgiveness. Liam struggled with that too. He'd go through periods of wanting to reconnect with our parents, imagining some tearful reunion where they'd apologize and we'd heal together. Then reality would set in, and he'd remember they'd never apologized, never admitted what they did was abuse. He was 17 now, working at a coffee shop and attending community college part-time. He still had hard days, days when cravings hit, or when the developmental delays made school frustrating, but he was surviving. We both were. I'm 25 now. I've been sober for 11 years, longer than I was drunk. I work as a social worker specializing in substance abuse cases involving children. Liam is 21, in college studying psychology, wanting to help kids like we'd been. We talk about our childhood sometimes, trying to make sense of those lost years, trying to understand how our parents convinced themselves that raising alcoholic children was acceptable parenting. The damage isn't something you recover from completely. I'll always be an alcoholic, always have to monitor myself around alcohol, always carry the physical consequences of years of childhood drinking. My liver shows signs of scarring. My cognitive function is good now but might decline earlier than normal as I age. Liam has it worse, his younger brain more severely affected. He'll likely deal with learning disabilities and emotional regulation issues for life. But we're alive. We're sober. We broke the cycle that had apparently existed in our family for generations. When I give talks now, I always end the same way. Your family's normal isn't necessarily normal. If something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Reach out to a teacher, a friend's parent, a counselor, anyone who might listen. Because abuse doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like tradition. Thanks for hanging out till the end. If you want more stories, make sure to subscribe and leave your take below.